Look at the motorcycle. Steel, 2 wheels, a seat. Now name its one real property, not the shape. It's speed. You cannot see speed. The form hides it completely. For 400 years, a painter had one job: paint what you see. Then, around 1900, what you see stopped being what is there. Here's what I learned. A genius idea almost always looks obvious when someone shows it to you. So the thing that separates you from a genius is not the idea. It is the road they walked to reach it. From a problem nobody could solve, to an answer that suddenly seems simple. Over the next hour, I will walk that road with you, again and again. You will stand beside the artists who redrew the world every time science broke it. Each faced a question with no answer yet. Watch how they found one. By the end, you will look at the flattest, strangest painting you know, and see the thinking inside it. So where does that road start? Ask most people and you get the same picture. For an insight to strike, you need the right setting. A glass of wine, a quiet room, a good dessert. For some, the Maldives. For some, the Alps under snow. Sit there long enough and the flash arrives. But researchers have been watching creativity for 70 years, across every kind of person, and they long ago found its rules. There is nothing romantic in them. The criteria turned out to be almost dull. And I do not mean everyday cleverness here. I mean the creativity of a genius. Think Shakespeare, think Mendeleev. Not people who did their work well, but people who brought something genuinely new into their field. That is the level we are climbing to. The first rule is simple. Make something new and make it useful, not just for you but for a whole field. Sometimes you improve the field. Sometimes you break its walls and open a new one. Freud did the second kind. He took a corner of psychology and turned it into a domain that had not existed before, psychoanalysis. But new and useful does not fall from the sky. It has conditions. First, you must know your own field code. You cannot crack a problem in physics if you do not know physics. Second, you must know the fields next door. An art historian blind to history and literature will never make sense of a painting, because a picture without its context stays shut. The third condition is the hard one. Flexibility, tolerance for the unknown, openness to the new. In one word, curiosity. And this is where almost all of us fail. We are built to save energy. Why cut a new path to work when the old one is known? It is efficient. It also keeps the mind still. So the rare gift is not talent, it is curiosity. And two kinds of people tend to keep it. Those who move between languages and cultures and artists. An artist is simply someone who can look at an ordinary thing from a side you never turn it to. So here's the first question that broke the old answer. What do you do when the world starts moving faster than your eye can follow? For a long time, painters agreed on one thing. The world you can see is the world that is real, and the painter's whole job is to copy it. That was the rule, and it held. Then, at the turn of the century, everything shifted at once. Politics, the cities, science, the way ordinary people lived. But the deepest break of all was simpler than any of those. It was speed. So, think about how fast a person could know the world. For most of history, you knew it at the speed of a running horse. Then, in the middle of the 1800s, came the steam engine, and suddenly you knew the world at the speed of a racing train. 50 years later, the internal combustion engine and the speed of a car. Each engine handed the painter a world the last one never had. 3 speeds. 3 different ways of seeing. The first painters to feel it were the Impressionists in the 1860s and 70s. Their name comes from one word: impression. Because they had seen something new in the city. Today did not look like yesterday, and it would not look like tomorrow. The street was a different place now, full of people, noise, hurry, a crowd that never once held still. But the old way of painting could not hold any of that. Look at Corot's bell tower of Douai. A narrow street, a tall stone tower, the light even and calm, everything standing perfectly still. That manner was made for a world where nothing happens, where the same view will still be there tomorrow morning. It cannot carry a crowd, it cannot carry movement at all. So they changed the brush itself. They opened the stroke up, quick and temperamental, laid onto the canvas so you can watch the hand move across it. And with that stroke, they caught what the old manner always missed. A single fragment torn out of the flow of life, already slipping away as the next one arrives and the next. Light and air in motion. The moving crowd, the whole restless pace of a modern day. That was a real discovery, and for the painters at the end of the century, it changed everything. For the first time, a painter could put modern life straight onto the canvas. Changeable, restless, unrepeatable, exactly the way it felt to stand inside it. The Impressionists had found how to paint the present tense. It solved the city, but the city only ever moved at the speed of a crowd. The engine was about to move a great deal faster. Here's the problem the engine brought. A machine no longer shows you what it is. Stand a motorcycle in front of you and look. Its shape tells you nothing about what it does, nothing about the speed locked up inside it, and that speed is the entire point of the thing. The open brushstroke could paint a crowd. It could not paint that. The rush of it, the sheer whoosh, gone before you can see it. Not with a brush. So, the futurists stopped painting the object at all. They painted its property instead. Not the motorcycle, but the rushing. In 1913, Giacomo Balla did exactly that and called it Forms and Noise of a Motorcyclist. There is no motorcycle in it. Only a spiral, radiating light, and speed torn loose from the machine that made it. And this is why painting only kept getting harder from here. Not because painters wanted to show off or make things deliberately strange. Because the world itself was getting harder to hold on a flat piece of canvas. The task had genuinely changed under their feet. The 20th century would go on to ask more questions of a painter than every century before it put together. The futurists had answered the motorcycle. They painted the property and let the object itself go. But speed was only the first crack in the old rule, because back in 1895, a single ray had already proved something far worse. Your own eyes are lying to you. In 1895, unknown rays are discovered, X-rays. Point one at a living body, and it looks straight through the skin. What you see on the outside and what is really inside turn out to be two different things. Sit down in front of me. I see one picture, but inside you look nothing like it. And inside, almost every one of us is the same. So here is the verdict, and it is not comfortable. You cannot trust your own senses. They either lie to you or they quietly hold something back. Everything I see out the window right now is not what is really there. The world is something else, something I cannot always name. So how does a painter paint that? Painters split into two answers, and here is the first. Stop painting the object, paint its essence instead. You do it by reaching for the language of abstraction, almost abstraction, a near abstraction. Look at these two paintings before I give you their names, and try to guess what each painter is chasing. The first is Wassily Kandinsky, an improvisation on a theme, and the theme is cannons. Paint the barrel on its wheels, and all you get is a heap of cast iron on wooden wheels. Nothing of what a cannon really is. Because the essence of a cannon is the shell it throws, the burst that rips space open. It makes everything tremble, even the steadiest thing comes apart. That is what Kandinsky paints. Same move, another painter. Lentilov paints the bell tower of Ivan the Great. Why is a bell tower built? So the bells ring and the whole district hears them. But how do you paint a sound? You paint the sound waves, and under those waves the old, centuries-strong architecture bends and twists and writhes. That was the first answer. Here is the second. Paint the essence again, but by reduction, stripping a thing down to its base. And you will say, wait, that is just what children do. What makes Picasso any different from a child? Here, Nothing. Picasso liked to say we would be idiots not to watch our own children. Children are geniuses, he said. They never sink into detail. Ask a child to draw a hare and a mouse, and you get 2 circles. But one circle gets 2 big ears and a small fluffy tail. The other gets little ears and a long tail. For the child, that is what tells a hare from a mouse. And nothing else matters. So we do not draw 10 lines or 25. We draw 2, the essential ones. We hunt for the quintessence, the first element of a thing. Picasso walks a bull straight down that road, from a classical, realistic, fully detailed bull, step by step, to a bull that is only a few lines. Cover the early drawings and you still know it. A bull, some horned beast. Paint a thing so it looks nothing like itself, and still carry its essence. What is the essence of an acrobat? The gift for a somersault we could never throw. So paint a somersault. Arms in one place, legs in another, the head somewhere else entirely. Paint that and you have painted the person. This method caught fire in the 20th century, and above all amongst sculptors. Look at Branche, a Romanian sculptor who moved to France. He said the essence of a thing should be shown as plainly as possible, reduced to a few base forms. His first piece here looks like a head. Why does it look like a helmet? 1920. The First World War has just ended. What else could a man be but a man in a helmet? The next piece is harder to name. Those carved shapes. That is how Branchik encoded a cockerel, the quintessence of the bird. Then a third, an embrace, a kiss. Why spell out how each person looks if the essence of an embrace is simply 2 people turned toward each other? And the last one, an animal, a seal. For Branchui, that is the quintessence of a seal. We do not draw 25 lines with dots on them. We draw the thing in 2. We save our energy so the other 23 lines can go to something else entirely. That is the whole idea. Think like a child. Push towards simplicity, but keep the essence of the thing. So painters split into 2 answers, and you should hold both, because we are about to need them. But both answers still leaned on one thing. The world is made of things. Then the physicists split the atom, and even that stopped being true. All our lives, we were hunting for one thing, the first element, the single letter that the whole text of the universe is written from. For a while, that letter was the molecule. Then it was the atom, and we were sure we had finally reached the bottom of the alphabet. Then the atom split. Underneath it sat even smaller particles, and under those smaller ones still. There are many of them now, and new ones keep turning up to this day. There is no bottom, there is no final letter at all. For us, this has been ordinary news for 100 years. But stand where a person stood at the start of the last century, when the news was still fresh. Here is what Wassily Kandinsky wrote. The splitting of the atom echoed inside me like the sudden destruction of the whole world. Suddenly, the thick vaults collapsed. Everything became uncertain, shaky, and soft. I would not have been surprised if a stone had risen into the air and dissolved. For that person, a scientific discovery and a miracle had become the same kind of thing, members of one family. And for a man like Kandinsky, you get the sense the miracle was actually the easier of the 2 to believe, easier than the science of an atom that would not stop splitting. So the painters picked up the physicist's question and asked it as their own. What is our world actually made of? What is the first element? And they began to offer their own elementary particles, their own building blocks for the whole of creation. Kandinsky answered first. He wrote a whole book about it, called Point and Line to Plane. The real building blocks of the universe, he said. The little cubes that everything is stacked from come down to just 2 shapes, a point and a line. He did not invent this. He spotted it already sitting in the world and pointed. A seed is a point. A tree grows a trunk, and that is a line. Branches are lines, leaves are points. Every living thing down to a virus or a bacterium comes down to points and lines, straight or wavy. Then he pushed past the living. Radio waves, electric waves. Wavy lines again. Even other kinds of art fold in. Look hard at this one picture and tell me what you see. It is a human body, caught at the very top of a leap in a ballet. A point and a line on a plane. So Kandinsky built his abstractions out of nothing but the point and the line. This is Composition 8, painted in 1923. You search it for a person and find none. No hero. No Adam, no Eve. But that is exactly the point. This is not the world of people. It is the layer underneath it. The elementary particles that the whole of creation is stacked from. Kandinsky found his first elements by copying them straight out of nature. A seed, a trunk, a leaf. But what if you did not copy nature at all? What if you could write the whole world in a single right angle and 3 colors? Picture Mondrian at the easel. He's Dutch, and for years he paints the Dutch country the way everyone paints it. Low earth, high sky, and the windmill standing straight up against that sky. Its mast a hard vertical line. Realistic work, nothing strange about it. But he keeps looking and he starts to notice one rule that will not leave him alone. Landscape after landscape, it is the same. A windmill, a church, a steeple, always a vertical, and under it, always the flat horizontal of the land. He simplifies one in his head then another in the whole scene, and it always comes down to the same 2 lines crossing. Watch the mill itself change on his canvas. The stone loses its detail, the cells flatten into shapes. Soon it is barely a mill at all, a red form and the lines that hold it. He is stripping the world down to find what it is made of. The mill is just the first thing to go. So he pushes the thought all the way out, not just landscapes, everything, male and female, good and evil, up and down, heaven and hell, black and white, the whole world he decides is built from opposites, pairs that stand against each other. And the deepest pair of all is the horizontal against the vertical. In 1917 he turns it into a system and gives it a name, neoplasticism, the new plastic art. The rule is brutal and simple, a horizontal line and a vertical line crossing at exactly 90 degrees. Nothing is allowed to lean. The color obeys the same discipline. Only pure colors, scrubbed of any feeling, red, yellow, blue, white, and black to frame them. No sunset orange, no muddy shadow, no private taste. Just the 3 colors as they are. Anything subjective is thrown out. What is left is not a scene at all. It is a diagram of how the world is put together. And here is the claim underneath all of it. Every canvas is built on the golden ratio, and that 90-degree angle he believed is the actual math the universe is made of. God and creation, one beautiful formula. Mondrian was not inventing anything, he thought. He had the formula right there on the canvas in front of him. Which is why he said, a person is unhappy. The world runs on one formula and you run on another. You're inside the creation and out of step with it, following a rhythm that is not the world's. His cure was not a painting, it was a house. Put those right angles into the rooms where we spend our days, the walls of a home, the halls of a university. Build a formula into the architecture itself and bring the human being back in step with the world. So Mondrian never invented a world. He copied the one already here, its formula, down to the angle. Then a Russian looked at that same formula, decided it was finished, and started drawing the one that was supposed to come next. Look at a black square on a white ground. Most people see abstraction as a retreat. The moment painting gave up on the visible. It was not what it looked like. This square is not an ending. It is a blueprint. He named the whole system suprematism from a word that means the primary, the foremost, the first thing of all. Mondrian and Kandinsky had picked at the laws of nature and copied them down. Malevich was a futurist to the core. He was not hunting for the elements of the world we already have. He was after the elements of a life that does not exist yet, a technocratic future. You will say a square is just a square, a shape a child could draw, empty of meaning. That is how most people see it. But Malevich chose it for a reason, and the reason hides in one strange fact about where squares appear. So why a square? Go looking for one in nature and you come back empty-handed. The mountain is a triangle. The sun is a circle. The square is almost nowhere out there in the world we did not make. And that is the point. The square is the mark of the human, the one shape we carry to the world instead of taking from it. From that one square, everything else is born. Inscribe a circle inside it and the circle appears, or let the circle grow until it swallows the square whole. Then take the square like a small box and unfold it into 4. Now you are holding a cross. In the 1910s, these first elements arrive in black. Then the same forms return in white. Then in the 20s, Malevich lifts them off the flat canvas and makes them solid, standing objects you could walk around. These are the same first elements, only now they have weight. He builds architectons, abstract structures assembled from those same elements, and planets, which are actual houses, not houses for us, houses for the earthlings of the future, the people meant to inhabit the world he was drawing. Here the blueprint stops being a private theory. The architect Zaha Hadid named Malevich as one of her teachers. In her own words, Malevich helped her turn an abstract method into a working principle. Look at what she built and you are looking at his elements, standing up. Set your drawings beside his models and the family resemblance is impossible to miss. You can drive out and stand in front of the proof. It is real, finished, built. Her private house in Barvika, in Russia, is not a copy of anything Malevich ever drew. It does not need to be. Set it beside his models and it is plainly the same idea. Then, fly over the Moscow School of Management, Skolkovo. From above, the campus looks like one of these compositions on paper, the kind Lisitsky, Malevich's ally, was drawing, and the architect pointed straight back at Malevich himself. So, look again at the whole thing. These painters were never decorating. They were theorists of reality, as bold and as serious as any scientist, each offering a full theory of the world. That hunger to think alongside science begins in the early 1900s. By the end of the century, it has a name of its own, science art. And if artists were theorists of reality, they could not stop at buildings. The next frontier was inside your own skull. Cut open a skull and look for a memory. Go on, look, you will not find one. No little photographs stacked somewhere, nothing you can hold in your hand. And yet you are carrying thousands of them right now. Whatever is in there is written in code. So where does it actually live? 2 painters went looking. Not with a scalpel, with paint. Sereni called his answer memories of a journey. Look at it. Everything he ever saw on the road is dumped into one frame, all at once layered on top of itself. No order, no horizon, no first and last. That, he says, is what your memory really looks like on the inside. You are not remembering the trip in order. You are remembering it as one collision. His friend Umberto Buccioni took the harder case, the memory of the dead. He called it states of mind. Those who go. Watch what time does inside it. The face of someone who is gone does not disappear all at once. It blurs. The features soften, the figure comes apart, until you are left holding an outline where a person used to stand. Memory does not delete them, it lets them fade. Now the discovery that quietly changed everything. Sight is not your eyes. Someone took the process apart and found 3 pieces. The eyes are only the first third of it. Behind them, nerve fibers carry the signal back, all the way to the back of your skull. And there sits the occipital cortex. That is the real organ of sight, not the eyes. The eyes only collect. The seeing happens at the back of the head. So here is what your brain does without ever telling you. You stand in front of a building. Your eyes catch one face of it, one side, flat. But you know the other three are there. You can picture them without taking a step. That quiet filling in is the occipital cortex, rebuilding the whole thing out of a sliver. It happens so fast you mistake the guess for the seeing. This is what Picasso decided to paint. Not eyesight. Mind sight. The object is that whole three-part process knows it. Every side at the same time. Look at his brickworks at Tortosa. The house opens up from all directions at once. Your eye alone could never see that. Your mind always does. Then take his girl with mandolin. You do not stand still in front of her. You walk around her, slowly, and the canvas lays each view over the last, one on top of another, 10 times over. It is exactly the trick your own brain runs on the hidden side of every person you have ever looked at. The Cubist said it in one line: "We paint not what we see, but what we know about the world." Read that twice. We look at their canvases and call it distortion. A broken window, a joke at reality. It is the opposite. It is accuracy, the fuller kind. Sight finally telling the whole truth instead of a third of it. If sight is only a guess and memory is only a code, then the face in a portrait is a lie too. Every portrait ever painted. So what is a person, really? 2 cities vanished in a single flash. Hiroshima, Nagasaki. When the atom split into a weapon, it shook everyone, but it shook the painters hardest. Salvador Dalí built a whole period of his art out of it and gave it a name: nuclear mysticism. He took the splitting of matter itself and turned it into a question about God. It was his fear. If matter splits and splits again and never stops, then what sits between the smallest particles? Maybe nothing. Maybe they hold to each other by nothing at all. Maybe the most important thing is missing. Maybe there is no God down there, just emptiness. That fear turned him in the middle of his life to Catholicism, and out of it he made a wager. However far you split the atom, he hoped, behind it stood not emptiness, but God. If God is there, humanity still has a chance to survive. If there is only emptiness, this is the end of us. So he painted it. The title is one long unpronounceable word, and buried inside it are the letters D and A. Crick and Watson had just shown that the molecule of heredity is a double spiral, and Dalí laid that spiral across the canvas. Above it, God the Father lifts Christ from the dead. Physics, genetics, and resurrection in a single frame. Dalí sets 2 molecules against each other. The molecule of life is the double spiral of DNA. The molecule of death is common salt, sodium chloride, the salt of the sea. Only the year before, in 1962, the sea had flooded his Catalonia in a disaster. Life and death, painted as chemistry. And this is where the trouble starts for a painter. The gene now looked like the thing in charge. Some even called it selfish, running its own program through you. If half of who you are is written in a code you never chose, then how do you paint a human being at all? Once, the answer was easy. You painted a person to match the person you held in your mind. You thought of Catherine II as an empress of the Enlightenment, so you gave her a grand formal portrait to match. The image on the wall equaled the image in your head. That was the whole contract. Then science broke the contract. The formal portrait now reflected nothing, because appearance and the inner world turned out to be 2 separate things. The face on the canvas was, in its way, a lie. Freud had shown that what you are aware of is only the tip of an iceberg. Everything under the water is the unconscious, and it will not be sorted into neat drawers. So look at Jackson Pollock. He drops the brush, lays the canvas flat on the floor, and lets the paint fly. What he makes is a self-portrait of that hidden part, the part under the water. It is a recording of biological impulses, the body writing itself down. And the record is physical. Drink a cup of coffee, feel the jolt, work fast, and the paint scatters in a fine spray. feel flat and empty, and it falls in heavy drops. Every canvas is the state the painter was in that day, not what he looks like, what he is. But after the gene, one question hangs over all that flung paint. Where is the DNA in it? Where is the code that runs half of him? Marc Quinn gave the hardest answer of all. Make the portrait out of the very matter that makes the person, out of blood. Quinn drew 4.5 liters of his own blood over 5 months, froze it, and called it self. Blood carries the likeness and the code at once, the face and the DNA in one frozen object. He needed 5 months and his own blood to fix a single person. So, what happens when the discoveries get stranger than any painting can hold? Marta de Menezes will paint your portrait while you sit and read a book. She paints other people asleep, and beside every face she hangs a second picture, a scan of that same brain, taken in the exact minute it was reading or sleeping. Her argument is simple. A portrait should catch one state of a person, and the state is only ever what is happening inside the brain. So the scan is the honest likeness, not the face. She calls it the single tool that can fix a true portrait of one person in one exact minute of their life. She once caught a friend at the piano. Beside the photograph she hung the scan, the same woman's brain while her hands were making music. That is what you are actually looking at, not a pianist, a mind caught mid-note. By the 1970s, that was already plain. The artist could no longer manage without the scientist. The questions are written in a language so dense that the painter working alone will lean on a false source and never once suspect it. And the scientist is trapped in the mirror of that problem. The discoveries of the last century became so complex that almost nobody understands them, or why anyone should pour billions into a collider. So the scientist needs to be understood. He needs a way to talk to people who will never see the equations. Not to defend the budget, to actually be understood. Two needs pointing straight at each other. Out of that, near the end of the last century, a new direction grew, and it earned a name, science art. And it runs in both directions at once. One way, the artist walks into the research center. She asks her questions, watches the experiments run, and builds a performance or an installation out of what she saw. The other way, the scientist walks into the studio and borrows the language of art, just to finally be understood. Bioart is only one branch of this trunk. There are others. 2 of those experiments still stop me cold. One rebuilt the Big Bang inside a gallery. The other let a single thought through the paint. Start with CERN. Ruth Jarman and Joe Gerhardt, who work as semiconductor, spent time inside it. They studied what a Hadron Collider really is. In 2018, they turned the whole thing into a single room, a dome above your head, transparent walls, and you walk straight in. They called it Halo. You do not watch it from outside, you are standing inside it. The small white specks drifting past you are elementary particles, blown up, enormous, and slowed almost to a stop. A human eye can follow a single one. What they were chasing was the collider tube itself, and the universe, one moment after the Big Bang. The second art began somewhere far gentler. Jody Chung loved neuroscience, but he also wanted to reach the people the world had quietly shut out, the ones who cannot hold a brush at all. So he built them a room of their own. Canvases stood in a tight box, all turned to face each other, and the person in the middle chose the colors. Those colors were sealed into a sphere, and onto that sphere he fixed a detonator. Everything was set. Nothing had moved yet. Then the helmet went onto the head. The faint electrical signal of a single thought set the force of the blast. In one instant, the paint tore across every canvas at once. Every brain fires differently. Every thought in that 1 second is different, so no 2 of these paintings can ever match. Each one is simply whatever was inside the mind at the instant it went off. This is the real answer for people the world had stopped looking at, and it is honest art for exactly that reason, because all art is the brain at work, an inner state finally made visible. These artists reached for the newest machines they could find, but the oldest question in art was still sitting there unanswered, and it was about something as simple as a step. A young man stands frozen. Look at his feet. One is planted flat on the ground, the other rests on its toes, the heel lifted as if in one more second he will step toward you. He never will. That is a sculptor named Polykleitos, solving motion in a still figure. This is one of the oldest questions in all of art. For thousands of years since antiquity, sculptors and painters have chased the same impossible thing. How do you put movement into an image that, by its nature, cannot move? Centuries on, the same problem, a different answer. The winged Victory of Samothrace was made to stand on a headland above the sea. Her robes are soaked and dragged flat against her body, as if a hard sea wind were pushing on them. You cannot see the air moving. You can see her force her way through it. The Impressionists reached for it with paint. They loosened the brush and left every stroke open and showing. The whole surface seemed to shimmer and shift, never quite settling into a fixed thing. Then look at this. Swirling shapes, broken color, and you would struggle to say what you are seeing. It is a room full of people dancing. The Futurists had a new method, and they called it simultaneity. Many moments seen at once. They took a single movement, cut it into frames, and laid those frames one on top of another on the same canvas. So you paint a girl not with 2 legs, but with 24. At first you think you're looking at the crowd. You're looking at one child, walking, every step of her printed onto a single sheet. Other artists stepped off the canvas altogether. Alexander Calder hung shapes in the air and let them turn. The moving ones he called mobiles, set going by a breath of air or a touch of the hand. The still ones he called stabiles. And he never hung them against clutter. A mobile floats in front of one bare wall, lit so that its shadow is thrown across the plaster. When a sculpture turns, the shadow turns with it. The shadow is part of work. Then there is a living man who takes all of this further, and he will not accept the word artist. Théo Jansen is a Dutch engineer. He builds what he calls animals, structures of plastic tube and valve that walk across the sand. He speaks about them like a biologist. At the root of each one, he says, sits a genetic code, 2 signs, a tube and a valve, a 0 and a 1. Small noses along the body sense water. When it seeps into the tubes, the valve snaps shut and the animal steps 2 or 3 paces back, away from the sea. Jansen calls this evolution, though he admits the hand doing it is his own, reworking them year after year. His latest animals carry a row of plastic bottles as air tanks. When the wind dies, the creature opens the bottles, breathes the air it saved, and keeps on walking. And here is what he truly invented. On wet sand, a wheel sinks and stalls. So Jansen made legs that are not wheels, but half wheels. They roll the body forward in one smooth curve, heel to toe, never sinking in. They look as if they walk in a straight line. They do not. Each one travels a slight arc, and that curve is exactly what keeps it steady and feeling out the ground under it. Artists had spent lifetimes solving impossible problems of technique. Then a larger one arrived that had nothing to do with technique at all, whether beauty was even allowed anymore. Ask anyone what art is, and most say the same word, beauty. For most of history, they were right. A painting was supposed to be great, beautiful, a thing you wanted to stand in front of. But last century handed painters a different job, and beauty in the old sense could not survive it. Here is the reason. Beauty cannot exist in a cruel world. The world is not without beauty. Our lives still hold plenty of it. But beauty in the form it used to take, that form cannot hold anymore. Something broke it. So look at what the century did. First, the First World War. Then the Second, a truly terrible war. Then the atom bombs. Then the terror that never quite stops. And the painter said, after what a human being has done, there can be no beauty. One of the last century's most famous philosophers put it in a single line. After Auschwitz, you cannot write poems. And to some degree, I agree with him. To write pretty verses after that would be a kind of blasphemy. There can be no poems after Auschwitz. So painters begin to destroy beauty inside their own work. Think about it. To paint pretty flowers while there is a war outside your window. While people are being killed. While the tanks roll and the gas comes and the bomb goes off. That is just hypocrisy. Look at how Kirchner answers. He paints himself like this. His self-portrait as a soldier from 1915, a man in a uniform. And where his painting hand should be, there is nothing, a stump. He has cut off his own hand. You have to know what a hand means here. The hand is the symbol of the artist. Look at the old self-portraits of the masters, and the hand is always pushed to the front. The beautiful wrist, the long fingers. That is the sign of the gift, of what a painter is for. Now Kirchner takes that symbol away from himself. He says, I cannot paint while the cannons are speaking. And it is deliberately overstated. He served in that war himself. His hands were fine. He was never hurt. He cut the hand off on the canvas, not in life, to say the time is too cruel for beauty. And the second half of the century, it goes further. Rothko writes it plainly. After what a human being has done, he has no strength left to raise a hand, even in a gesture of despair. Let alone stand as the hero of a painting. So the human can no longer be the hero. This is the second road into abstraction. Remember the first, some ideas are abstract, and you simply cannot paint them as figures. Here is the second, painting of objects, of people, no longer holds. It stops carrying the truth of what is happening. Ask yourself the hard question, how would you paint the Gulag? How would you paint the camps? You cannot do it with figures. If we just paint people dying in the gas chambers, it does not carry the pain, the drama, the sheer scale of it. There are not even words for it. So the anguish goes somewhere else, not into what is drawn, but into how, into the color, into the paint itself, into the brushstroke torn and raw. The break is carried by the way the picture is made and by the way the colors collide. And if a human being still appears at all, it is only the way Francis Bacon shows him. No beautiful features, never again, because the face is no longer worthy of them. We may be lovely to each other, kind, decent one-to-one. But humanity as a whole stripped itself of beauty by the things it did and the things it let happen. So beauty is off the table and the human can no longer be the hero of a painting. Which leaves one question standing. What is a painting even for? Strip it all away. No beauty. No decoration. No pretty picture to hang over the couch. What is left for art to do? The first answer is the one this whole hour has been about. Art asks questions. Yes, there are painters still turning out landscapes and quiet, still lifes, fine craftsmen. Every one of them. But a still life from our own century is hard to tell from one painted 400 years ago. They do what painters did 1,000 years back. They do not carry the pulse of now. The artists I have been showing you stand where Rembrandt and Leonardo da Vinci once stood, on the front edge of their own time. They show you what art is for them and which ache it answers now. They are not illustrating their century. They are the point where you can finally see it. And most painters would agree on this much. Art should ask questions. It should speak about the present in the language of the present. Look at this. A pond of water lilies, green light on the water. The soft blur of Monet. The kind of painting that sells as calm, as pretty, as nothing to argue with. Now step closer. Tom Deininger did not paint a single stroke of it, he built it. Toy soldiers, dolls, torn-off heads, wires, knives, forks, whatever he found on the street, whatever he pulled out of the trash. And that is the trigger. Look at the pile up close. We have littered the whole planet, then outdone ourselves and littered space as well. There's junk in orbit over your head right now. His own self-portrait, built from the same debris, is a portrait of how all of us live. That is the first answer. Art asks questions. The second answer is easier to say and harder to do. Art should make a person better, not in theory, in practice. Kassel, 1982. Joseph Beuys piles 7,000 blocks of basalt on the square in front of the Friedrichianum Museum. Then he says, "Let us plant an avenue of oaks. The oaks would fix a great deal, save us from an ecological desert, even bind Germany and Russia together." Nobody believed him. An artist? They figure he was half mad and the stones would be hauled off soon enough. But time passed and the stones stayed. So, Beuys picked up a shovel and began planting the oaks himself. And in front of every oak, one block of basalt went up. And the planting turned into something else. People met over it. Someone proposed. Someone married. Neighbors who had lived side by side for years and never once spoken finally began to talk, working out who would plant where. Think about that for a moment. A pile of stones and some saplings did what years of living next door could not. It got two silent men to speak. That is art doing its second job, out on the pavement, with a shovel. That is Beuys' whole idea. You do not become better by looking at a painting and feeling improved. You become better by doing something with your hands, for something larger than yourself. So here is what art trains in you, quietly. Divergent thinking. The nerve to allow another way of seeing and to invent one of your own instead of just accepting the views around you. Modern art asks you for openness, for acceptance, for the willingness to stand somewhere new. And where it lets you in, the walls of your own mind move outward. That is a muscle these painters were building in you, canvas by canvas. Now go back to the start. You cannot see a motorcycle's speed. And painters kept inventing ways to paint exactly the thing you cannot see. The speed inside the shape, the particle inside the atom, the sight inside the eye, the person inside the face, the movement inside the face, the movement inside a still image, the pain no photograph could hold. That was the road, from an impossible question to an answer that looks simple once it is drawn, and you just walked it. So look again at the flattest, strangest painting you know. It is not empty. It is someone's path of thought, laid down where you can follow it. That is what these artists were really doing. Not decorating the world, but thinking about it out loud in paint as boldly as any scientist. Art is one of the few places that trains you to hold a point of view you did not start with, not to borrow one ready-made. Open that door and your own horizon sits further out than you believed. And if this is your kind of thing, subscribe.